Hi everyone, Joshua Hanlon here, and today I'm at the Frontier Army Museum in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and I'm with Megan, and she's going to give us a little overview of kind of what the history is here at the museum and a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at their collections. So before we dive in, what do you do here at the museum?
So my role here is I'm a museum specialist. It's kind of Army speak for museum curator or collections manager. Essentially, my job is to take care of the collection, create exhibits, education programming, pretty much everything inclusive at a museum.
Yeah, fantastic. So what types of stuff does the museum cover here? What's kind of the main historical time periods that you have on display?
So we do westward expansion. So we do 1804 to 1916. So we start with Lewis and Clark and we go all the way to the punitive expedition. So we have everything from wagons, a biplane, uniforms, boots, pretty much anything, you name it.
Yeah, this is a really interesting time period because a lot of people might be familiar with, obviously you've got like big museums in the country dedicated to like the World War I Museum, which is in Kansas City. You've got like the World War II Museum in New Orleans, but this time period I don't think is covered nearly as much. So what are some of the unique aspects of kind of collecting artifacts from this time period and having this stuff on display?
What I really like about this time period is just seeing the technology that was available. So we think of westward expansion, Oregon Trail, you think of just dusty, dirty, wagons going by, but the technology they had was pretty impressive, especially when it came to weapons technology, different kinds of clothing, the way they manufactured things and mass production. I think that was really interesting because sometimes they were just so inventive of how they would utilize the resources and just mass produce it for the Army.
Now, obviously, you've got a tremendous amount out here on public display, but you also have some really incredible collections kind of behind the scenes in the archives. So what types of things do you try to preserve that you can't necessarily have out for the public to see?
So in our collection, we have over 6,500 pieces in our collection. Only about 4% is on display. Most of the macros or large artifacts are on display, and the smaller pieces are in our collections. But we change things out depending on what type they are. So textiles, paintings, things like that, they can't stay out very long. So we have to change them out usually yearly in order to preserve them. We do have a small couple pieces that are very delicate, so we don't take them out as much if they're silk or something like that. But for the most part, we do switch things out just so people can see them for a limited time and then put them back in the collections to rest. What are some of the challenges of preserving things from this time period? Because we're talking about stuff that's upwards of 100 years old, or a couple hundred years old actually. So you've got uniforms and hats and all sorts of things like that. How do you work around some of those challenges? Most of the time it's whatever the material's made of. So most of the time they're pretty well made. A lot of the jackets and uniforms we have are wool and they're just really well constructed. But a lot of things, especially we have today, they're just integral, right? So we have wool jackets that have metal buttons with it that are tied together. So we have to make sure we put like barriers in between things like that. Or some things are just naturally will fade away. Silk is a very good example of that. So all these artifacts have been used at some point. So people have worn them and fought in them or did anything. So there are things that have rips and tears and things like that that we can conserve. But I think that kind of helps tell the story a little bit better and makes them really unique. One of my favorite things I like to show is actually a World War II baseball uniform. Even though it's technically outside of our time period we cover, it is tied to Fort Leavenworth history, which we also tell. So this is a baseball jersey for the Sherman Army Airfield. About a year ago, a gentleman contacted me and said, hey, my father played baseball. He was there in World War II at Sherman Army Airfield, 3rd Squadron. And we're like, we had no idea there was a baseball team at the airfield. And so he came in with this beautiful uniform top that had the insignia on the back and a matching hat. And we were just really excited to get that piece of Fort Leavenworth history because we didn't even know about it. And then recently he actually sent me a picture of the team in the uniforms as well. So it's great to kind of be able to have that piece of history that we didn't even know existed at Fort Leavenworth. Guys needed to have fun,
Oh
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We have an exhibit here that talks about playtime of Army, so it's not just drills and things like that. They have time off. They can play games or music or ride or dances, things like that. So you have to have a little bit of relaxation. So
we saw some really neat saddles in there as well. So obviously horses are a big part of this part of the country.
Yeah. So Fort Leavenworth was known to the gateway to the West. So when we were established in 1827, once you went west, there really wasn't a lot out there. Maybe a few, small isolated posts out there, but for the most part, Fort Leavenworth was the big hub before you went out west. And that was the way to go. Horses, wagons, that was pretty much it. The trains didn't really come in until late 19th century. So if you were going somewhere, you're riding the horse or marching. We have a whole set of different flags that we lay out flat. They're all different time periods. One of my favorite is a silk 10th Cavalry flag. It's pretty much the whole entire entity of it is silk, and then it's hand painted. So flags, guidons, all those kinds of things were pretty necessary. Pretty much as you were marching through, they would have those up for morale. So even though we kind of don't think about Army and morale, it's very, very important to that, especially that time period. So we're the 10th Cavalry, we're coming through, right? You're proud of your unit, your organization. So that's a great example of that. They were just all hand painted, very unique. Each one's different. Oh, it's just, I love it. It's beautiful. I love it.
It's really fascinating.
And that's something you say about the Army, beautiful, right? But there are some art pieces in the Army. It's great.
And then obviously you have like weapons as well on both on display and in the archive, so that's a big part. It is an Army museum, so that's kind of the thing that people think of a lot.
Yeah, they do talk about the Army, and most people think of weapons and artillery and things like that. But we also have a section where we talk about scientific exploration, and I think that's kind of a unique idea because people don't really think of that. So Lewis and Clark was all exploratory. We talked about topographical engineers and pretty much their scientific exploration of mapping the West that we had no idea was even there. So there's a lot more to the Army than I think people think than just weapons.
No, exactly. And there's so much to see here when you walk through. And I love that you've even recreated a lot of these, in as historically accurate as possible, like you were pointing out to me earlier, kind of the colors of some of the wagons and that sort of thing. So, it wasn't all like drab black and white colors.
Very colorful, very colorful back then. Yeah, if you come and see our uniforms, they're just very beautiful and intricate. We have a lot of gold gilding on them. The wagons were bright blue and red, so very colorful back then. Even though photographs might not really help display that, it was actually a really bright and colorful time back then. Absolutely.
So this is a fantastic museum. If people are interested in visiting or learning more, what's the best place to kind of find information about this?
Sure. So we're on Facebook. Just look up Frontier Army Museum. We also have a website. Just Google us. It'll pop right up. If you want to come visit the museum, if you are a veteran or have a DoD card, you can come on post easily. If not, not a problem. You do have to go to our Visitor Control Center. Essentially, you go there and you apply for a daily pass, and then you can come on. And not only is the museum here, but we are also a historic post. So it was established in 1827, and it's gorgeous. We're right off the Missouri River, and we have a lot of unique things you can come see. For example, the Buffalo Soldier Monument is here. We have the original piece of the Cantonment Wall here as well. Some of the original buildings are still here, so it's a whole day you could come and check out if you're really a big history person. Yeah,
I mean, you can really immerse yourself in kind of the history of just this whole area and kind of the frontier history as well, which, like we were saying, is a really unique part of American history that's a lot of fun to explore. So thank you so much for kind of the overview of everything you do here. It's really exciting to check all this out. I appreciate the insight.
You're very, very welcome. Smell great.
I know.
Wait till I open the
history wafting through here.
Everyone walks in, they're like, the museum smells. I'm like, that's the smell of history. Now this piece is one of my favorite pieces. So this is a War of 1812 light Dragoon helmet.
Wow.
Has the original horsehair on it, black lacquered, the knuckle plating. It's complete. It's in really, really good condition. I always joke, I looked up on Smithsonian, they have one, but ours is in better condition.
Yeah.
Oh, very
Yours
good.
looks pristine.
Yes.
Mint. So. Also donation?
It might have been donation. Sometimes we have a few things that we have purchased, that the friends have purchased and then donated to us, but probably in the last 20, 30 years, we've only had gifts. So, oh, this one's kind of fun. This is a folding cap, forge cap. So you can fold it into a small little square to put in your pocket. This is one flat piece, and you can see how it's like mounted up different. It's layered.
Right, okay.
So there was more money put into that one. Than this one. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So,
Wow.
yeah, I did not do American history, so I learned all that. I've been here for 6 years, and I've learned so much. I'm the stuff person. I do the stuff. Yeah, we get a lot of people who want to donate stuff. So all museums pretty much follow, like, is it within our storyline? Do we have room for it? But the Army's also cracked down on that. So there's a lot of rules of what we can and cannot take. So cannot be duplicates unless it has extra convenience to it or background information to it. So like, if I'm trying to think, we have 1916 campaign hats. We have about 10 of them here. Unless someone was like, oh, my grandfather was stationed at Fort Leavenworth, wore this, cool. But if they're just like, hey, I bought this somewhere.
Yeah. It's going to have significance to what the museum does or the
Sure, the
local area.
storyline, the location, things like that. If not, if it's a duplicate item with not really a lot of context to it, and we already have a representation of it, we usually don't take it in.
So
Sometimes you might take it in for education purposes and have it like as a touch collection, but official collection, it's pretty tight, stringent.
So when you say like provenance, is that provenance to an artifact? Is that what it is?
Yeah, to like who wore it, where was it used, things like that. And then we have winter caps. Do you guys have an idea what kind of fur that is? Any guesses back there?
Beaver.
Close.
No.
It's a muskrat.
Muskrat.
Yeah, so the Army did all kinds of different experiments with furs, and they found out that muskrat was really great because it could get wet and dry and it wouldn't become brittle. So a lot of furs and gloves were made out of it. We do have some black bear gloves too, though. So any types of fur they can have, they would, but muskrat was heavily used.
Do colors oxidize as well? Like, do things get darker or more orange?
I mean, this was
Like,
like a white.
white.
And you can obviously see that it's colored over ages. But ideally, if you have flags, this is how you're supposed to hold them flat, or you can roll them. On
So when you see them that they're displayed in frames, is that okay because they're pressed?
Depends, yeah. It depends if they're behind like UV glass, great. If they're pretty tightly pressed, that's probably good, as long as there's no sagging. But I wouldn't keep it up forever. Lay it flat. You have to take it down and rest for a little bit. So people will come in like have it folded in a box, like requested for education and research purposes. So these are Cheyenne Indian drawings. They were given to Captain Custer in 1881, and so these were actually done by members of the tribe. They're just a whole bunch of graphics.
Huh.
Just pages and pages. Wow. So yeah, we've had a lot of people come in and do research and publish on these pieces.